several of their branches just immediately shut down. They went to them and they were not open, and there were notices on the door that this branch will be closing, whatever. And this was the same with three different major banks that are in the state of Pennsylvania. They're not national banks. They have a large reach, but they're not, it's not like Bank of America. It's not like Chase. I'm not going to mention them by name because I was told not to. But they just immediately shut down. And when the people that were going to the bank tried to call the bank, the number was also disconnected, which is super, super extraordinary when it comes to banks, especially when there's no notice of such a thing. Like, you have your money there, it's your local branch. Now where do you go? These people weren't told anything. They just showed up and there's a notice on the door and the phone's disconnected. Very, very bizarre. Not bizarre, though, if you have been following me for a while. Because about 2 months ago, I said that this same thing was going to happen. If you remember back to one of my lives, I can't remember which one it was, but I said that there are going to be a lot of branches of banks shut down, and there's going to be some banks in particular that are no longer going to be in existence. And that is now playing out. And it has been playing out actually for the last, probably about 30 days or so. But now it's coming even more in your face type stuff. Reports are coming in from all over the place. I actually saw a couple other truthers. I think her name is Sam or Samantha or something. She's on Twitter. I'm surprised she's not suspended from Twitter. But she had Twitter and she was saying the same thing. People in Pennsylvania were actually telling her the same thing too. And I was getting the same info from different people. So this is it seems like a statewide thing in Pennsylvania. I don't know if any of you have experienced it, in your states, but I know that there were many reports coming out of Pennsylvania today. Somebody just asked in the chat over there, Linwood said EBS tomorrow. I did hear Linwood say that. We've been talking about EBS for quite a while, so it shouldn't really surprise anyone if it does happen. I think tomorrow, Friday, and over the weekend should be some interesting days based on what I'm expecting. I don't necessarily, want to speak too much into it. I've done that in the past, and I was told to shh. So. There were a couple different items that I was going to talk about tonight that I kind of want to push off until the weekend for reasons that I don't really want to get into. But we're going to wait on those. And what we're going to do tonight is hop directly into the President in Exile series by Stag. And again, as I said earlier, this is not necessarily put together by me, Stag, or Slag, I'm sorry, with an L, S-L-A-G. Slag did a really good job of putting together information that was already out there. This information is already out there. It's not stuff that, is based in theory. It's not stuff that's based in guessing, or it's not stuff that's based in opinion. The stuff that we're going to go over tonight is a direct, takeaway from information and documents that are already available for everybody. It's just that we don't know where to look. All right, I got to ban this guy. Hold on one second. There we go. Okay, sorry about that. He's gone. So what I'm going to do, instead of putting together my own presentation and PowerPoint where we're, screenshotting stuff, I'm actually just going to pull up the direct link to Slag's website, and we'll go over the article, and I'm going to comment on it. We'll read it a little bit, and then I'm going to comment on what I know, in addition to what's being said in the article. So I'll do that right now. Just get it on the screen here. And of course, because I love seeing myself, I have to put myself over the top of this thing. Because if I don't see myself, my narcissistic traits just go haywire. And, so let me just. So we're going to do that. And then, oh, I know what we got to do. We got to slide this which way? This way, right? Yep. There we are. Okay. Probably as good as I'm going to get it. So that's what we'll go with. Okay. So first, to recap, what we want to remember here is that the concept behind everything that we're talking about in regards to wartime presidency or in regards to devolution, or in regards to whatever situation we're currently in with our current state of affairs with the United States government, it all is premised on the fact that before Donald Trump left office in January of 2021, he did what we call devolution of the government, where he essentially suspended the Constitution, declared that the country was under attack, some sort of attack, not the type of attack that we think of, but a very similar attack, which is even worse than the type of attack with missiles and bullets and bombs and stuff like that. So Donald Trump declared a state of emergency when it came to COVID. That gave him sweeping powers to do numerous different things in regards to what we're going to go over tonight. Continuity of government, COG, it's called the COGS, COGS, and numerous other things. So we went over, this camera's driving me nuts, I really got to fix this here. That's fine, but it's really aggravating, honestly. So here's what we're going to do instead. There we are. I guess, right? Good enough. I like it. All right. So that's the premise on what we're talking about tonight. And if you haven't read my Devolution series, which I did a couple months back, all of the past videos on that are on my website, philgodlewski.live. You can get all of them from there. And you could watch the Devolution series to kind of catch you up to where we are tonight. And I think if you do that, you'll get a good background before we even get into tonight. If you want to rewatch them, later after we do this tonight, you could. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over all of the different points that Slag went over in his series. And then after that, we're going to have a discussion and where you guys could weigh in, ask some questions. But the questions that I'll take tonight at the end are going to be specific to devolution and the president in exile theory. And I think this is important for you guys to really focus in on tonight, because the president in exile theory is what brings Donald Trump back to the forefront and back to the presidency the quickest. No other path offers what this path offers. So we really need to understand what's going on here. And as I said earlier too, with the explaining to your friends and trying to red pill your friends and that kind of stuff, you need to know, you need to be educated on these particular topics if you're going to attempt to red pill anybody. Because unless you know how Donald Trump is able to come back, how are you starting a conversation with anyone at all trying to explain to them what situation we're currently in our government? Because the majority of people that are out there right now think that Joe Biden is the president, he is running the government, and onward. So in order for you to be able to explain it, you really have to understand this stuff. So I think of tonight's live almost as like an educational setting where what's truly going on in the government is actually being talked about by us, discerned by us. Go back to Telegram after tonight, discuss it amongst yourselves. Maybe somebody could pick up on a point that either I missed or Slag missed or Patel missed or whatever. We're all in this trying to decipher what's going on here together and trying to understand it better so that we could help other people wake up to the lies that are currently being told to them. So I think that's what tonight is. It's kind of like an educational get together on what we are currently living through. Okay. So this little yellow X that I just put up there at the top, I'm going to be using that tonight to keep my place in the document as I go through. So as I'm reading something, I'll just do one of these quick things. So this one starts out by saying at the top, what's the difference between devolution, government, and exile? That was a question that Slag and Patel Patriot talked about. And this here says, this article will go deep and explain the similarities and differences between these two theories and how they mesh together. At the end of this, I think you'll come to the conclusion that we cannot have one without the other. And I've read this article the day that it was written, and after reading it, I actually went back and I read Patel's summation on devolution, and then I went back to this article again and I read it again. And that first paragraph right there is 100% correct. You cannot have the current president, Donald Trump, being a president in exile unless he did devolve the government, unless there is devolution and we are living through devolution. One thing I want to point out right now is this has never happened before in the history of the United States. So if you try to look back and find some precedents on the events that you're currently living through, you're not going to be able to find them. This is all new. Our government has never been hijacked by a foreign power before, or really by anyone before. And if they did, at least they weren't caught. This time they got caught. And because they got caught and because we had all of that evidence, instead of acting on that evidence right away when the evidence was obtained back in November of 2020 and December of 2020, they sat on it. And they said, well, you know what? We're just going to devolve the government. We're going to catch them all instead of just some. So that's kind of what the Patriots decided to do. Instead of putting their foot down and be like, no, this guy's not leaving office. That guy did not win. Our guy won. So he's not going to leave office. Do something. Instead of doing that, they said, all right, we'll just devolve the government, suspend habeas corpus, suspend the Constitution, and you'll see what happens. Give us about a year. And that's kind of what it's coming down to, about a year. So there were some things that could have expedited the events that we're going to talk about tonight that didn't really happen for reasons that we talked about in the past. But what I think you're going to see at the end of tonight is that it's all coming to a fever pitch. It's all coming to a point right now. It's all about to boil over. Slag goes on to say, let's step back a minute and talk about devolution, about when devolution goes active and when a government in exile goes active. Simply put, devolution is a reaction to an attack. As I said before, an attack not of the likes that you're used to in a typical war, but an attack on our nation's base, on our nation's foundation, in this case, our elections, our free right to, choose whoever we want to be in government, whether it's a congressman, a senator, in this case, sitting president of the United States. So devolution is a reaction to an attack, whereas government in exile is a reaction to an invasion. In writing this article, excuse me, guys. In writing this article, it became difficult to snap a chalk line in order to organize some events on the devolution side and others on the government in exile side. I look back through my articles and the ones that Patel has written and realized that in many instances we were discussing the same exact material. So again, one kind of plays into another. Devolution and government in exile, they are opposite ends of the same exact spectrum, and I wouldn't even say opposite ends. They're very much related in the same spectrum. It was there I realized there's a simple dividing line between the two ideas. Number one, devolution is the military chain of command executing decisions with a pre-written battle plan, while a government in exile is a civilian government displaced as a result of an invasion by a foreign power. Now, when we think of invasion, our minds automatically think of, boots on the ground. We're taking over a country with, bringing in troops, kind of like Russia invaded Ukraine. But that's not the type of invasion that we're talking about. This invasion was an infiltration and an invasion of our government at the highest level, the highest seats in our government. We're all the way down here. Let me scroll down a bit. Okay. So we're right up top here now. It says Patel and Slag have merged these definitions a bit, and there's much crossover between the two. I found this definition the easiest way to reconcile the two sides and merge them into one functional unit. Now, keeping that definition in mind, what is devolution? Devolution is a set of orders ready to go in the event of a catastrophe. Here's a fictional example. April 1983. Just a couple short months before I was born. Imagine that. I think Edward Snowden was born that same week. If I'm doing the math right. Yeah, same week. Interesting, isn't it? Tensions between the USSR and NATO are at a very high level. This is also the time of a huge NATO exercise, Fleet X. The Soviet Union believes that they are about to be attacked and launches a massive nuclear strike. At the same time, a Soviet ballistic missile submarine has sneaked close to the United States coastline without being detected. The submarine launches her missiles at Washington, D.C. Total flight time is 3 minutes. The president cannot be reached in time and dies in the nuclear blast. The military is uncertain who is the commander-in-chief at this point, but must launch its own counterattack before the Soviet missiles strike the silos. Fortunately, a pre-existing battle plan is available in the event something like this happens and is implemented immediately. Command is devolved, hence devolution, to the commander of NORAD, and launch orders are given. In the battle plan, it is instructed that an emergency, commander-in-chief is dead, keep in mind, permission action link code 000000 is entered and the warheads go active. Don't laugh. This really was the launch code before President Carter ordered it changed in 1977. The missiles launch before they are destroyed by the incoming Soviet warheads. Now, that scenario is hypothetical, but something like that devolved battle plan certainly does exist. That hypothetical battle plan is devolution. It allows the military to act in the nation's defense if the president were to be killed or incapacitated and there was no successor. Now, that hypothetical example is only there to show you a different example of devolution. This one has to do with missiles being launched and nuclear warheads and the president actually dying. And what's the plan? There has to be a plan. If you are the military, if you've ever been in the military, or if you want a look as to what the military does, they have a plan for everything. Every single course of action has a plan and a counter plan in case something happens along the lines of, especially something so important, such as the hypothetical example you just saw with the president being killed by a nuclear attack and so forth. If there's no successor and there's no clear line of succession to a very crippled government, there's a plan for that. Now, the plan that we're currently in, because of the hijacking of the election, the 2020 election, is obviously a lot different than a president being killed, but it just highlights the point that it's the same concept. If this happens, what then? If this happens, what then? If this happens, what then? And so forth. So that hypothetical example, although it never occurred, if it did, there's a plan for it. If an election gets hijacked by a foreign power, or really by anybody, by the Democrats, by the deep state, by the cabal, whatever, there's a plan for that. And we are in that plan right now. Key takeaway: devolution mostly involves the military, but may have some civilian input to achieve the continuity of government mission. No matter who's involved, a devolution plan allows the United States to continue its military functions to respond to an attack or even to fight a war under special circumstances. But what about a government in exile? This is where he starts to differentiate the two terms, devolution and government in exile. When nations are invaded and about to be overrun by an enemy, an option available to them is to vest all governing authority into one person or a group of people, and arrange for that person to flee the country before capture. I go into detail in Wartime Presidency 2 about how this exact situation has happened to the government of the Philippines, and how I noticed similarities in what Trump was saying and in what Trump and his team were doing. How about merging the two theories together, devolution and government in exile? When President Manuel Quezon fled the Philippines, he couldn't take everyone. Many Filipino and American soldiers were left behind and continued fighting the Imperial Japanese forces until the official surrender on May 7th to May 10th of 1942. After the official surrender, many of those in the American and Filipino armed services continued to fight as guerrilla forces. They did so until the liberation of the Philippines by Allied forces on August 15, 1945. During the Japanese occupation, the resistance was so successful that the Japanese only managed to control 12 out of 48 provinces. So again, just another, example of how this has happened before. Although it was a long time ago, the cabal hopes that we forgot about it, but we didn't. All this happened without any input from President Quezon or legislature of the Philippines. The Filipino armed forces were operating under a form of devolution. Evidence for devolution. There's tons of evidence for devolution. We've talked about on my show many times about devolution. Patel Patriot, as you can see from the links that are on this screen right here, there's many, many parts. He did a whole running, series of devolution over many weeks. He did it. And before you guys, start saying stuff about Patel and me, I don't care what Patel has said about me in the past. I don't care. I think his material is good. I'm not the guy to go out there and bash somebody else because of something they did or said or I don't like. I don't care. His material is good. I think he wrote a very good devolution series. I think he was on point with all of it. If he dislikes me or likes me or loves me or hates me, I really don't give a shit. All I know is his his perception of the devolution theory is right on point. And for that reason, no matter what he says about me, I'm going to highlight his work. So there you are. Slide goes on to highlight just some of Patel's work on devolution, and he gives links. I will post this article, by the way, to my Telegram channel once I'm done tonight with the live. All right, here we go. Now we're getting into some stuff that Trump actually enacted before he left office. This is Trump's Federal Mission Resilience Executive Order, FMREO, or EO 13961 of December of 2020. Keep in mind the date, December of 2020. That is exactly 1 month after the election fraud took place in November of 2020. Link to the article is there in case you want to read it. As Patel wrote in his article, this one document is proof of devolution because we have seen behavior from the federal government that matches what's written in this document. I'll also point to the color revolution that Patel explains in detail in Devolution Part 12. And again, the links are there. So if you read that executive order that's on the screen right there, or even if you just Google it, EO 13961, what that describes is what's been happening in our country. The only document you need as confirmation of devolution is that executive order. And it's ironic. It's not ironic. It's not coincidental. It's proof that the devolution theory that we've been talking about is currently in effect. It was written in December of 2020. It was written because of the election fraud while Trump was still in office. This is after Kash Patel, Chris Miller, Ezra Cohen, Watnick, and several others were put into very, very important positions of the government, if you remember. And everyone's like, well, why put them there now? You're leaving office in 2 months. You just lost the election. Well, that's why. Because all of these executive orders and these other forms of documentation were about to be unleashed, and Trump needed very loyal people on the inside of this plan that he knew were not going to betray him in any way, shape, or form. Talk briefly about a color revolution for those of you that don't know it. A color revolution can be defined as a regime change brought about by street protests, disputed elections, and favorable media coverage. Does that sound familiar? Because I'm pretty sure we're in the middle of all of that for the last year and a half now. Most color revolutions are brought about by the support and influence of a foreign government or NGO. They're usually not brought about by popular support within the nation borders, except Hitler. That foreign influence is key because depending on the scope and the depth of the influence, a successful color revolution may be considered as a debilitating attack or an invasion. This puts it within the authority of the U.S. military. And that's where, to me, all of this kind of comes full circle, right? When you are in that special circumstance of some sort of color revolution, it is a debilitating attack. Just because a nuke wasn't dropped on New York City or Los Angeles or Miami or wherever, that doesn't mean it's not a debilitating attack. A debilitating attack is having your election hijacked and the rightful president or the rightful senator or rightful governor or whoever it may be is actually not in power. That is a debilitating attack because now we have all these policies in place of of elected officials who were never elected by the people. So that's a debilitating attack, and that's exactly where we're at right now. Let's remember the events of 2020. Let's think back now. Were there street protests? Yes. Thousands of them. Every major city. Was there a disputed election? Yes. President Trump has repeatedly and consistently said that the outcome of the 2020 election was fraudulent, while the media and political establishment have said that there's zero proof of these claims. Okay? So we are, again, living in the middle of all of that. Oops. Was there favorable media coverage? Yes. Mainstream media in the United States was hypercritical of President Trump and supported the protesters no matter what they did or how violent they became. Was there foreign involvement? Yes. And here's the smoking gun. On May 30th, 2020, it was caught on Twitter that a protester rushes the barricade set up around the White House, and you could hear the Mandarin Chinese, go, hurry up, leave quickly. Listen here for yourself. And then Slag actually provides a link to that actually happening. And if you guys want to take a quick screenshot or a quick copy and paste of that. Well, you can't copy and paste this because it's video. But yeah, just proof that foreign entities were involved at some capacity. What capacity? I don't think we actually know how deep foreign entities were involved in this particular event. I do think, though, I do know that Trump and the Patriots know exactly how deep they were involved. And that is what ties the color revolution and devolution and everything else together. This person was likely a Chinese spy trying to incite the crowd to rush the White House grounds and hope that the protesters would be shot by Secret Service agents doing their duty to protect the President of the United States. Had this occurred, it would have been the Kent State massacre of our time. It would have been legal, and it would have been justified use of force to protect the office of the president. but it also would have been the end of the republic. The enemy would have a final and decisive victory. As Dwayne Cates has said, that's why Trump went to the bunker that night. The Secret Service protects the president and the executive office, not the building. Once the president and executive staff were safe, the need for deadly force evaporated, and the protest was simply a crowd control issue. So, again, we're sort of tying theory now to actual events, and that's what tonight is all about, and that's what the President in Exile series and the Wartime Presidency and Devolution is all about. Look at the written words of these instances, tie them to actual events. Does anyone remember Trump going into the bunker that night? Probably not. You probably think past that because of everything that we've been through over the last year and a half, right? You probably just think past it. But it happened. And that's why it happened. Because it was supposed to happen, because that is exactly what happens in a state of devolution. There's the man. Does this image in front of St. John's Church make more sense now? The Republic survived, God won. You could see it in his face. Can't you? I could. I could see it in his face. That is not a man standing in front of St. John's Church for a photo op. That is a man standing in front of the church who is very grateful that he's still alive and that the nation is still intact. And that's how close we were. And that's what they wanted to happen, but we prevented it. There are many different areas, many different steps along the way where we could have lost our republic once and for all. And the Patriots did an excellent job of keeping everything, corralled and, implementing our defense strategy. Our offensive strategy is about to come into play next. Says at the top here, also the military was monitoring the 2020 election. If we could see evidence of cheating, you could bet the farm that the military did too. Remember General Nakasoni's tweet? This is on November 3rd, 2020. November 3rd, 2020. November 3rd, 2020. As tens of millions of Americans head to the polls, U.S. Cybercom and NSA government teams around the world, NSA Gov teams around the world are fully engaged, working hard with our partners to defend our elections. We took what we learned in 2018 and brought it to an entire new level for the elections of 2020. What we learned in 2018? What do you think they learned in 2018? They learned about how they were committing election fraud in 2018. They knew it was happening. They knew what happened with Hillary. When Trump beat Hillary, they cheated like crazy for Hillary. She still lost. That's how many votes this guy actually got. They cheated so bad, and he still won. And he browbeat her. It wasn't close. I mean, he got 320, I think, electoral votes. And they knew between 2016, they didn't say anything. After 2016, they knew, but they didn't say anything. And while all of the left and the cabal and the deep state and the Dems, they're all trying to impeach, and, he's a Russian spy and all this stuff. He's a rapist. He's a racist. While they were all doing that, Trump and his team were looking at what happened in 2016 with Hillary, and they were preparing for the 2018 elections to see what they would do again, to what level they would take it to again. And they figured it out, and then they were watching in 2020. They knew it was coming. He knew it the whole time. How many times did you hear Trump say election fraud before it actually happened? He's trying to get us to look in that direction. He's a very smart guy. He wanted us to look in that direction, and then when it actually happened, we could be like, oh, that's exactly what happened. We were looking. Top of the page here, the color revolution and the stolen election provided all the justification needed to activate devolution and protect the nation. One more thing. Remember how Acting Secretary of Defense Chris Miller said he needed to look the Northcom commander in the eye. This was 6 days before Trump left office. Here's the transcript. This is from Chris Miller. I needed to look the commander in the eye because, the president, Secretary of Defense, me, whatever the correct English is, you guys can clean that up, should have paid more attention in high school. My wife would be ashamed of me not knowing the proper preposition. And then General Van Herk, so, I just said it. You can have VTCs all day long, but you want to, I wanted to look the guy in the eye and get a sense of his soul. And I think he probably needed to do that for me as well. You could see by Chris Miller's words, he was kind of trying to say something, but couldn't quite get it out because he didn't want to say. He wanted to say what he wanted to say, but he was trying to push it down, So who is Whoa, there goes my ex. So who is General Glenn D. Van Herk? He's a 4-star general in the Air Force, and his official biography lists his current position as Commander, United States Northern Command and North America Aerospace Defense Command, U.S. NORTHCOM, conducts homeland defense, civil support, and security operation to defend and secure the United States and its interests. Let's see. Secretary Chris Miller, who had just conducted some of the most complex military operations in our nation's history, he said that. That was a direct quote. Some of the most complex military operations in our nation's history. What? What are you talking about? What military operations? We weren't at war. There was no Russia-Ukraine. There was none of that. I remember he said it, the most complex military operations in the history of the United States. Where were we for that? Because he was talking about this. So Chris Miller, who just conducted those operations, wanted to meet face to face with the exact general you'd need to devolve the military chain of command and make sure Brandon has adult supervision. That was the guy that you needed right there. You didn't need the entire military. You didn't need every general. You didn't need anyone but this man. Chris Miller wanted to meet with this man because if this man agreed to devolve the government, that was all Trump and the Patriots needed. No one else. Chris Miller wanted to meet him because he's kind of at this point just going off of this guy's word. This is what's happening, Mr. General. This is what we want to do, and we need you to do certain things along the way for us. Are you in? Now, this general could have said, yeah, it's good, let's go. All right. And then he could have changed his mind. So Miller wanted to meet this guy to make sure that he was legit. Because this is a big, big thing. Right? Slide this up here a little bit. Now we're going to go back to the quote by Chris Miller. I needed to look the commander in the eye because, the president, SecDef, me, and then General Van Herk. President Trump was at the meeting as well, if you look at the transcript closely. By the way, I do strongly suggest you try to find that transcript of Miller, Trump, and Van Herk. Very, very interesting. I remember reading it after it happened, but I haven't seen it lately. But that was the start of it all. That was the start of devolution, and that was the start of what put us where we are today. Oh, we need a mod on DLive. I'm sorry, I thought I had mods on DLive. Who do I need to ban? That one right there. Okay. Delete and ban. Truth for real. Got him. Make me a mod, please. Okay. There you go, Mini Tink. You're now a mod. I don't know for how long. We'll see how good you do. There we go. Mini Tink, you are now a mod. Okay. Now that I lost my train of thought, let's get back to... Oh, my screen just got all messed up, didn't it? All right, there we go. We're back. Okay. So yeah, look up that transcript. That was what started it all. That was what put us in the position that we're in today, and what started Devolution, and what kicked off every event that followed. And it was that conversation between Van Herk, Trump, and Chris Miller. The press, of course, wants you to believe that they just complained about the cost of the F-35. Okay. Evidence for government in exile. Moving on now to a slightly different topic. When this series was initially, when I initially wrote this series of articles, there wasn't much evidence for a government in exile. I took some statements by President Trump, evidence of a successful cover revolution, and I looked to the past to see what other governments did when they were forced with an invasion. That's when I found Commonwealth Act number 671 and what the government of the Philippines did when they were invaded by the Empire of Japan. Forming a government in exile was a reasonable response by a duly elected government to protect itself in dire circumstances. However, since December of last year, if the idea of a government in exile is kept in mind, the behavior of the former Trump administration makes complete sense. Unlike devolution, we cannot point to a document and say definitely, quote, here is the evidence for a government in exile. But we can observe the effects. Number one, Mark Meadows in the cabinet meeting. I've been talking about this meeting and Mark Meadows for a very, very long time. This, to me, confirmed that Trump is running a shadow government. Trump is running a government in exile. This meeting in July of 2021 was all I needed. If I'm just a normie, if I'm just an outsider looking in, if I don't have any behind-the-scenes data, if I don't have any sources, if I don't have anything at all, and it's just you guys looking on the internet, looking for some sort of confirmation or, substantiation of Donald Trump still being president of the United States under these circumstances, all you need to do is look at that Mark Meadows meeting from July of 2021. Mark Meadows told the press on July 30th, 2021 that Trump had a meeting with his cabinet. His cabinet. What? Why would he be meeting with his cabinet when he's not president anymore? So I don't know if Meadows slipped or if that was designed. I'm not sure. But when he said that, very interesting. The press, of course, went nuts. They picked up on what Meadows was saying, only to have their confirmation bias kick in and dismiss the statement as nonsense. Did the government in exile of the Philippines do the same? Yes. Manuel Quezon had regular cabinet meetings with the cabinet members who fled the Philippines with him. Number two, let's talk about Pompeo. I think we all remember this. Mike Pompeo's statement about two State Departments. On November 10th, 2020, just a week after the election fraud, I should say, Mike Pompeo had a press conference. Mike Pompeo had a press conference where a member of the press asked his secretary if a delay in meeting with the Biden administration officials would cause a problem with the State Department. Intentionally or unintentionally, Mike Pompeo dropped a reference to two State Departments in his statement to the press. Let's take a listen. Maybe I could actually play this. I think I can. Let me switch my mic real quick. Actually, no, I'm gonna play it through the microphone. So, here we go.
Hi.
Is the State Department currently preparing to engage with the Biden transition team? And if not, at what point does a delay hamper a smooth transition or pose a risk to national security?
There will be a smooth transition to a second Trump administration. All right, we're ready. The world is watching what's taking place here. We're going to count all the votes. When the process is complete, there'll be electors selected. There's a process. The Constitution lays it out pretty clearly. The world should have every confidence that the transition necessary to make sure that the State Department is functional today, and successful with the president who's in office on January 20th, mid-afternoon, will also be successful. I went through a transition on the front, and I've been on the other side of this. I'm very confident that we will do all the things that are necessary to make sure that the government, the United States government, will continue to perform its national security function as we go forward.
So you believe there's widespread voter fraud, that the reports that we're getting from Pennsylvania, from Michigan, showing vote totals in massive leads or significant leads with 99% reporting are going to be overturned, and that the United States failed to conduct a fraudulent free election?
Rich, I'm the Secretary of State. I'm getting calls from all across the world. These people are watching our election. They understand that we have a legal process. They understand that this takes time. Right? It took us 37 plus days in an election back in 2000. We conducted a successful transition then. I'm very confident that we will count, and we must count every legal vote. We must make sure that any vote that wasn't lawful ought not be counted. That dilutes your vote if it's done improperly. Got to get that right. When we get it right, we'll get it right. We're in good shape.
Should foreign leaders not be calling
We're good shape.
President-elect Biden?
It was next.
Yeah.
So, Pompeo kind of clued us in just a week after the election. He kind of gave us insight as to what we could expect. Now, let's rip apart Pompeo's statement here a little bit. Quote, "The world should have every confidence that the transition necessary, that the State Department is functional today, is successful today, and will be successful with the president who was sworn in on January 20th, a minute after noon, will also be successful." Did you catch the subtle reference to two different State Departments? Will be successful, will also be successful. See, a lot of people don't look into the words like that. They see successful, and even when I just read it, when you heard it, and even when I just read it, if you missed it, you're normal. There's nothing wrong with that. You got to look at his words, and this is what Trump does a lot too when he says things. There's so much meaning in the words that he says that it's hard to bring it all in unless you really take your time, somebody steps back, and that's why the collaboration of Patriots doing these type of live streams and these truthers that are out there is so important. And that's what makes me sick when other truthers bash truthers, because what we should be doing is all collaborating and getting this message out to whoever listens to us. My audience is going to be different than Brad's, it's going to be different than Patel's, it's going to be different than Slag's. We should all be sharing the same information so we all know what's going on. Why? Because we can't get it from the media, right? That's why it's important to have so many eyes on this stuff, and that's always the premise that I've had. I think it became a competition amongst truthers somehow, and the ones that started winning the competition, got badmouthed. Whatever, it is what it is. Let's read that again. "The world should have every confidence that the tradition necessary, that the State Department is functional today, is successful today, and will be successful with the president who was sworn in on January 20th, a minute after noon, will also be successful." That is a key play on words. Very key. Taken alone, the statement means little, but just a grammatical error in saying that the one State Department will be ready. However, there's evidence that the two State Departments serving the interests of the United States. One is under Secretary Blinken, that executes the foreign policy of the Brandon administration. The second can be seen with former President Trump's going around, the second can be seen with former President Trump officials going around the world and meeting with foreign officials and nations. Look at the list. Rick Grinnell is in the Balkans as a special envoy to help Bosnia and Serbia reach a peace agreement. Why? Why would Rick Grinnell be there? Mike Pompeo, former Secretary of State, is in Taiwan accepting an award and meeting with officials. Taiwan. Mike Pompeo in Taiwan. What's he doing there? On the precipice of an invasion? No one else finds that completely out of the ordinary? Jared Kushner, former special assistant to the president, who everybody wants to say, oh, Kushner bad. I was asked about it last night in a Q&A. I'm sorry, guys. I just don't believe it. Jared Kushner, former special assistant to Trump, went to Saudi Arabia and the UAE back in January, February of 22. What? Why? Why would Trump's son-in-law, former special assistant, be talking to Saudi Arabia? Remember how important Saudi Arabia is in Jazeera? They hold the most of the money in the world, other than the Rothschilds. Steve Mnuchin, former Secretary of the Treasury, visited Saudi Arabia in October of 21. Mike Pence, former VP, met with the President of Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu. What's subtle but critically important? The foreign officials are agreeing to the meetings, and business is discussed. Official business is discussed. These are former officials in a former administration. That was really gross. In a former administration, in Trump's former administration, who are reaching out in some capacity, however they're reaching out, and getting meetings with these nation's leaders, officials, and they're discussing business. 2 State Departments, Trump's and Blinken's. And Blinken's knows. Ladies and gentlemen, that's foreign recognition of the government in exile. They are acknowledging that there is an additional government right now in the United States, and that government is run by Donald Trump. Right now, we have the following countries covertly recognizing the Trump government in exile. How do we know this? Because they are meeting with Trump cabinet officials. Serbia, Bosnia, Taiwan, Israel. We also have 3 other countries that are overtly recognizing the Trump government in exile. Saudi Arabia, UAE, Russia. Have they come out and said, we recognize the government in exile of the United States? No! And that's not going to happen because of the circumstances involved with the government in exile and devolution. They're not going to come out and say it. And even if they did, the media wouldn't report it. Because that's who everyone's getting their news from, right? The stupid, dumb, asshole mainstream media. You think that they're going to report this? No. Of course not. This is the world we live in. And if you guys are waiting for, CNN to come on and be like, oh, we got headlines. Trump is the leader of a government in exile. That's not going to happen. You guys have to come to people like me, whether it's me or somebody else. You got to come to people like me to get this news. Goes on to say, but recently, regarding the Ukraine situation, the UAE and Saudi Arabia are refusing to meet with the Biden administration. Vladimir Putin has even said that Biden is a illegitimate president, refuses to meet with his administration. I showed you the transcripts. A couple of you are sitting president of nothing. That's what he said to him. Dear reader, this is the one of the strongest pieces of evidence for the government in exile you ever see. Pay close attention to which countries recognize former Trump officials. It's very important which countries do recognize those officials, because when it comes to Jazeera, it's going to be an important little antidote, which will come in front of your eyes very soon. One more very odd thing. Right before Mike Pompeo arrived in Taiwan, Biden also sent a team there. The team was led by Admiral Mullen, former JCOS chief, Joint Chiefs of Staff chief, and will be joined by former that's what I get for making fun of him, then I can't speak. Former Deputy National Security Advisor Megan O'Sullivan, former Undersecretary of Defense Michael Flournoy, Mike Green, and Evan Medeiros, both of which were senior directors for Asia on the National Security Council. Here's what's strange about this. Isn't Taiwan the new conflict zone? Haven't we heard that China will invade Taiwan once Russia is done with Ukraine? Yes, I've reported that, and many others have as well. And that is exactly what's coming next. So that's what... there goes my X again. Now, this is Brandon's team. You will note that the support staff to Admiral Mullen are former national security people from the Bush and Obama administrations. Admiral Mullen made a name for himself in 2020 when he objected to Trump using force against Antifa, and what we now know to be Chinese agents, who he considered, quote, protesters. The protest happened on the night of May 30th, 2020, in front of the White House. Here's what we should point out. All the members of this diplomatic team to an international hotspot are former government officials. Why isn't Anthony Blinken going? Isn't the sovereignty of Taiwan an important issue in the Pacific? The most important person who's going there is actually Mike Pompeo, and Pompeo is meeting with Taiwan's foreign minister. Here's what we think. Taiwan is meeting with the Secretary of State of the government in exile. So out of all those people that are listed above, most of them are former officials from the Bush and the Obama administration. Blinken's not going. This is Blinken's job. Why wouldn't Blinken go to this meeting? Is it just, not important? No, of course it's important. Biden's trying to talk to Xi. They're trying to get, China to not go into Taiwan. It's a huge event in the Pacific. Just as big, if not bigger, than Ukraine and Russia. Blinken doesn't go. He puts all these past members of other administrations into the meetings. What the hell is that? You know why all those past people are going to the meeting? And by the way, all of those that are going from Biden's team, they're not even meeting with the person that they should be meeting with. But who is meeting with that person? Pompeo. So that's why it doesn't matter who's actually going to Taiwan from Biden's team, because the guy that actually has to be there is going to be there. Oh, but he's just getting an award. Get out of here. Like we're dumb. Most important person who's going there is Mike Pompeo, and Pompeo is meeting with Taiwan's foreign minister. Taiwan is broadcasting to the world that they've counted the cost, and when their national security is on the line, they put their faith and trust in the government in exile of the United States, not with Joe Biden. Now we're going to get into a portion where a lot of you are going to like, I think. Maybe not. Maybe you won't like it. General Michael Flynn, he actually went and said it. I'll let you listen for yourself. And we are now going to pull that audio up. Give me 1 second. You open that in a new tab.
Living Atkins for years now and having a killer sweet tooth. I've still got my candy drawer, and it's very well stocked with Atkins.
Let's listen to Michael Flynn.
There's plenty of my peanut butter cups, some chocolate coconut bars, peanut caramel cluster bars, and I never, ever run out of my peppermint patties. It's kind of like the day after Halloween.
I hate peppermint patties.
Without tons of sugar.
The American people, they saw through this from the very beginning, because it wasn't about Mike Flynn. It wasn't even about Donald Trump. It was about them. And when the left and the media started to attack the presidency of the United States of America, the American people saw that, hey, this is an attack on us.
Did it not play the whole thing? I think I played the wrong clip. Oh, wait. There we go.
Nothing beats the taste of winning.
Captain Star.
What is it, Comfort?
We've detected a traffic stop
Ads.
in an online personality quiz.
There we go. It's 12 minutes long. I'm not going to play this whole thing. I'm not going to play it. I'm not going to play it. It's just it's too long. I don't want this to take up the whole night. So, what we will focus on, though, is what Flynn actually said in that interview. And what he said was two governments, one elected and one selected. He gave us, just kind of as Pompeo did on that November 10, 2020 interview that he had with the press, another little key piece of information that serves as confirmation to the government in exile theory, to the president in exile theory. One government was selected and one was elected. That is, according to Slag, and I completely agree with them, the strongest example of a government in exile that you'll ever see. Who is part of the government in exile? Excellent question. Patel found the list of individuals mentioned in the FMR-EO as laid out in Devolution Part 13. Scroll up here a little bit. The Federal Mission Resilience Executive Committee. On this list, we have the following individuals. Now, if this doesn't hit you like a tornado, Chris Miller, Secretary of Defense; Chad Wolf, Secretary of Homeland Security; John Ratcliffe, Director of National Intelligence; Robert O'Brien, National Security Advisor; Tony Ornato, Assistant to the President, Deputy Chief of Staff; Russell Vogt, Director OMB; Mark Meadows, Chief of Staff, not named as an individual, but the position of Chief of Staff is the executive position that the other individuals report when they complete a deliverable as part of the FMREO. At the bare minimum, these individuals are involved in the government in exile, but they are more obvious people involved as well. Donald Trump, President; Mike Pence, Vice President. I disagree with this completely. I do not believe Mike Pence is involved in this government in exile at all. I believe he is an outsider looking in, if he is even still alive. So I'm going to disagree with Slag here and Patel here. I think the truth about this position is not yet out there for anyone to see, although I have some ideas. I'm sure you do too. Dan Scavito, Social Media Director; Rick Grinnell, Special Envoy and Ambassador; Mike Pompeo, Foreign Minister; Jared Kushner, Special Envoy and Ambassador; and Mark Meadows, Prime Minister. Who is in the devolved chain of command in the military? So here's your military people now. Civilian Lead, Chris Miller. Civilian Lead, Kash Patel. Civilian Lead, Ezra Cohen Watnick. Those would be great sources to have. Commander, General Glenn Van Herk, who we talked about earlier. That was the person that Miller had to speak to make sure that he was on board with this. Just one guy. You just needed one guy in the military, and that was him. USSOF. This comes from Miller's involvement. The USSOF were broken out of the normal chain of command and made independent. It's one of the official acts Miller did as Secretary of Defense. Who else? I know some others, but I'm not going to mention them here. But all of these people that are on this list, with the exception of Mike Pence, I believe Slag is 100% accurate on, as well as Patel Patriots. There are certainly others. Patel laid out a case for that in Devolution Part 9. I've listed these individuals here because I could point to a connection between them and a devolved chain of command, or they were involved with the government in exile. In other words, I'm fairly certain these people are involved. How does devolution and government in exile mesh together to protect the nation? Let me scroll up here a little bit. In order to answer this question, we need to step back to January 20th of 2017. That day, President Donald J. Trump was inaugurated as the 45th President of the United States. When Trump came into office, we had a visual for transforming the federal government from an entity that served itself at the expense of the citizens to an entity that served the citizens first. He encountered individuals with the federal civil service who were not at all interested in helping Trump make this vision a reality. A more accurate statement is that these individuals were downright hostile to what Trump wanted to do. Immediately, the establishment assigned minders, General Mattis, John Bolton, General McMaster. Their job was to make sure that the status quo wasn't upset too much. Ha! That didn't work out so well for the swamp, did it? Absolutely did not. In theory, the swamp intended to frustrate policy implementations, but actively thwarting Trump at every turn. The vast civil service ranks could also be relied upon to slow roll policy or even for acts of insubordination itself. And that brings us to a contradiction. Now that the swamp has Biden back in the White House and Orange Man Bad is gone, why can't Biden get anything done? Let me introduce an old military tactic. June 25th, 1940. 4 years and a day before someone was born. France falls to Wehrmacht as Hitler's armies march across Europe. Winston Churchill created the Special Operations Executive, or the SOE. These were the commandos that both trained resistant forces and carried out sabotage missions in occupied Europe. A little graphic there, sorry about that. There was another, far more secret group within the SOE, however. This group would be a constellation of commando units that would stay behind in Britain in the event that the island nation was invaded and conquered by Nazi Germany. Arms caches were constructed across the country and supplied. Had the Nazis successfully invaded Britain, these stay-behind troops of the SOE would have given the Nazi troops one awful time, and the Nazis wouldn't even have known it. It was like a secret little band of assassins. Fortunately, the Royal Air Force and Hitler's catastrophic military expedition into the Soviet Union made Hitler abandon his plans to invade Britain, and the stay-behind troops were never needed. Now, that happened in history. Now let's look at our present day. It's amazing how history repeats itself, isn't it? Here's what I think Trump did during this time in office. Trump never trusted the bureaucratic arm of the federal government or the military. Could Trump trust people like Lois Lerner or Colonel Vindman to faithfully carry out his vision? Certainly not. Another strategy was needed that would accomplish the same mission of the stay-behind SOE units in the event his administration was overrun. Trump implemented a three-pronged strategy, one that kept his options open in the event that the political establishment tried to cheat. And now we get into all of the things that Trump did prior to leaving office and leading up to the election fraud. Some of these things he did well in advance. The PEDs, you heard me talking about the PEDs for quite a while now. Trump issued a ton of PEDs. For those of you that don't know what PEDs are, they are Presidential Emergency Action Documents. Trump issued a ton of PEDs and EOs that were tied to the COVID-19 national state of emergency. So long as the emergency existed, the PEDs would frustrate the enemy administration. Prong two, and that's what I said, leading up to the election, this stuff was done before the election. They knew this was going to happen. They knew they were going to cheat. It was their only way to win, and they knew it was happening because of certain indicators that they saw happening. The Judas goats. A Judas goat is defined as, quote, a Judas goat is a trained goat used in general animal herding. The Judas goat is trained to associate with the sheep or the cattle, leading them to a specific destination. In stockyards, a Judas goat would lead sheep to slaughter while its own life is spared. Trump has placed these people into the Democratic Party over decades. You heard that right. Trump has placed these people into the Democratic Party over decades. Decades. What was their mission? Lure the Democratic Party to expose itself to the American people for what it truly is, a fascist organization hell-bent on dominating every facet of American life. And number two, maintain the status quo. They do this by making statements or authoring legislation that appears crazy to us, but brings out the true fascist wackos on the left. Those wackos think it's safe to let the masks slip and start implementing their plan, only to have the American people recoil in horror. Judas goats suck up all the oxygen in the room. They intentionally propose policy and legislation that cannot pass, even with Democratic control of the legislature. Precious political capital is spent for no gain. The status quo is maintained. Trump succeeds where his deep state minders failed. Trump is playing their game. They are taking Democrats and putting them into the Republican Party, rhinos, as we know them. Trump has been doing that for a while, and now that all of these pieces are in place, Trump is calling on them to do abnormal things that the American people see, and they're just like, What on earth is happening? Maybe we keep saying, oh, we're watching a movie, we're watching a movie, we're watching a movie. Unfortunately, sorry, I clicked away there again. There's my ugly head. I just wanted to make sure we were still connected on DLive. We're watching a movie. We are. These people were put in place so long ago and called on now to do certain things. Is Pelosi one of them? I remember a Q drop that was written by Q, of course. And it said, classified movement, Pelosi or Pence. Why would we be moving Pelosi? To stay behind troops, prong 3. Over 4 years, Trump would have been able to insert and promote select people within the federal civil service ranks in the event that Trump's administration was overrun by cheating. These people will be placed to sabotage the policy goals of the incoming administration. These stay-behind troops, just like the ones that Churchill implemented, would have been quietly inserted and promoted to positions within the civil service corps in order to inflict the maximum amount of damage to the incoming administration. And yes, I understand that that damage reflects on us as well, but ladies and gentlemen, we are in war. This is war and there are casualties. It's going to be made whole. We just have to stick to the plan and keep our heads right. Remember the list of failure that I belittled in the introduction of the Wartime Presidency series? That's the stay behind troops at work, sabotaging the Biden administration. Take a minute to note that these troops will not be able to thwart all of the enemy administration's goals. High fuel prices are an example. However, they will be able to frustrate some policy goals, such as, number 1, failure to implement federal universal vaccine policy in the private sector through OSHA. Failure to implement a federal vaccine passport. Neither of those things happened. They wanted them, but they didn't. Why? Because Trump left people behind to make sure that the current administration could not do anything too crazy. Stay behind troops. Remember the Filipino armed forces that became guerrilla fighters after May 10th of 1942? Those soldiers were stay behind troops and they waged a campaign of irregular warfare against the occupying Japanese forces. History shows this was effective. Japan only controlled a fraction of the total landmass in the Philippines. One last item. Something that we've talked about many times before and that a lot of us are concerned about. Could Joe Biden launch a nuclear strike? I know some people are concerned that if Brandon realizes his number is up, Weiss is coming for him and his family, and Trump suddenly creates a constitutional crisis that would thrust him back into the White House. Could the deep state panic and launch a nuclear strike against Russia or China in order to create a catastrophic event where they can implement the Great Reset? Slag says here, I wouldn't worry too much about that. I'm going to take it a little bit further, and I'm going to say no. First, Brandon can't just push a red button and launch the missiles. The system doesn't work that way. The release of nuclear weapons is a process that involves hundreds of people, literally hundreds of people. Foremost, the commander of the North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD, would be involved in any strike order. And who's that guy? I think we've seen his face before, haven't we? The guy that Chris Miller went to and said, hey, you need to look him in the eye and get a vision of his soul. That's right. General Glenn Van Herk, the same man Chris Miller and Trump met with eye to eye 6 days before Brandon took over. Trump thought of everything. We're in good hands. So, ladies and gentlemen, what you saw tonight, what you read and what I read and what we elaborated on is where we currently stand in our journey of righteousness. Do I agree with all of the different moves, counter moves, tactics and, otherwise that have been carried out by the Patriots to put us in this position? No, I don't. I would have done certain things differently if I were in charge, but I'm not in charge. I know a lot of you would have done things differently if you were in charge, but you're not in charge. There are certain things that we just have to have faith in, that we just have to have a sense of, we have to be followers. We have to have a sense of faith that the people that we are following are looking out for our best interests and are doing the right things for our future. And I could tell you that I'm completely confident that that is exactly what's happening. Completely confident. If you just watch the last hour and 45 minutes of this live stream and you, for some reason, don't think that there is no plan. You think that there's no plan, and you think that, we're just being strung along by, whether it's by people like me or Slag or Patel or Brad or whoever, right? If you just think we're being strung along because this is just one big money-making scheme and we saw an opportunity and we took it, and now Phil's the top of 7K and Andy and Todd and we're all making all this great money. That might be true. We are doing well, with our direct sales companies and with our business endeavors. But that's because we're working our ass off to do that. And that's also because we had the hindsight and the foresight to know what a good commission structure is for not only us and our family, but for thousands of other families. Philizon alone has brought over $1 million in sales to our vendors. $1 million in 3 months. $1 million that wouldn't have come if I didn't just start up the website. So yeah, I've made a decent living doing this. But honestly, I don't have to keep doing these lives. All of that, it's all just going to stay there. I'm in this to report the truth, number one. Circumvent the mainstream media and the lies that they tell. I'm also in this to try to help people out of dire positions, whether it's mentally, emotionally, financially. I'm trying to help as many people as I possibly could by sitting in front of a screen on a computer and a microphone from, as you saw earlier, half a world away. Well, not half a world, because the larger plane is much more vast than the world that we live on, so it would actually be like an eighth of the world, but that's getting very technical. And along the way, we have a little bit of fun. We have some events. We have, some other conversations about some things in the past that obviously do not ring true. And we try to see how the media, like, JFK and 9/11 and all those things, we try to look into those things a little bit harder, and we use our newly learned discernment to see how we've been fooled in those situations too. So yeah, we talk about some other things. But what we have to realize is everything that we have thought has been happening has actually been happening. Trump did not just walk away. Trump wouldn't have just walked away. He wouldn't have left us to suffer like this. Because I tell you what, it's not just the 4 years that Joe Biden was elected from, 2020 to 2024. We're never going to win another election. Our side will never win again. How could we? It'll never happen. So you had Donald Trump and the military and the Patriots and, the people that are actually fighting for freedom. You had those people in a position to prevent that from happening. And what, they just didn't do it? Nah, sorry. They have families that are going to live in this country. Trump's son, future grandchildren, Trump's daughters, Trump's other, his older sons and their children, And not only that, but the weight of a nation who loved him, and he knew it. He knew how loved he was. I mean, you saw those rallies. Many of you have been at those rallies. He's not just going to walk away from all that. He had an opportunity to cement himself not only as the greatest president in United States history, but the greatest world leader ever. Do you think he's just going to say, yeah, I don't want to be the greatest world leader or the most highly respected? No, anybody would want that. Anybody that ever ran for president or office at all would want that. And if he had the opportunity and the means and the support to do it, of course he would do it. And guess what? He had all of those things. So if you've had a hard time lately and you've really questioned a lot of the things that were going on, and you had a hard time believing that the state that we're in is actually the state that we're in, I hope you watch and rewatch tonight's episode, because nothing could more clearly highlight how real devolution, government and president in exile, and the plan that we've been trusting all along in this Great Awakening, nothing could highlight it more than we did tonight. So I want to thank you guys for tuning in. We had a lot of viewers tonight on DLive alone. I did implement a new API software to try to see how many viewers we actually had across. I actually went live on Facebook with this too, but that one was not, it was hidden from public. So I'll post some numbers later on, see what we got. But please share this video with your friends. This is a really good red pilling video, a really good introduction to, what's been going on, instead of the far reaching flat earth, Joe Biden's a clone stuff. This is something that I think you'll be able to share with your family and your friends, and how we broke down Slag's article and talked about points here and there, and we related them back to some things that I have said in the past and some other truthers have said in the past. I think this is a really good way to introduce reality, to reintroduce reality to your family, your friends, and some other people who you think are ready for this kind of thing. I know it's an hour and 50 minutes, but it's an hour and 50 minutes of very well spent time if you could get them to do it. So thank you guys very much. I will not be live tomorrow. I don't think I'm going to be live Saturday either. Sunday's up in the air right now, so take a break for a couple days. Follow me on Telegram. Get on my website, philgodlewski.live. Lots of good information is going to be coming there over the weekend. And I'll see you guys in a couple days. Have a good one.